Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Yay. Full house tonight. My name is Andrew Landry. I am the CEO and founder of Where Men Hurt. Where Men Hurt is a nonprofit organization designed to give men a platform to talk about real life issues in a safe, non-judgmental setting. One of the topics that we're going to address tonight is the social justice piece, or social injustice, depending on which side you feel like you may be on. So what we want to do is bring in a panel of officers that will help us kind of rebuild and repair that relationship between the community and the law enforcement. So with no further ado, I'll introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Philip Nunn.
I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. And first of all, on behalf of the President and CEO of Where Men Hurt, Andrew Landry, I want to thank everyone, all the attendees, all the panelists here who are going to give us some very good information on this particular topic of social injustice. This topic is important to me. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Philip Dunn, and I work for a national trade organization for Black-owned businesses. So I really have a vested interest in making sure that our community is served and cared for in a safe and secure way. And so we've assembled tonight a very solid panel of law enforcement professionals that will be helping us to come to better terms with the current situation when it comes to social justice or social injustice, as Andrew mentioned. And so I'd like to introduce our panel, and one by one, we're going to have them share a little bit more about their law enforcement history. And then we're going to get into some questions and some answers. All right, and then later on, as we wrap up the panel, we'll share some information on the law enforcement community that we have in our PowerPoint presentation on the stage. So without further ado, I'd like to start from the left. We have Officer Hutchinson Officer Bailey with Harris County's Homeland Security Force, and I'll have him share a little bit more in a second. We have Officer Hutchinson from HPD. Next to him, we have Officer Harris from Lone Star Community College. And then lastly, we have Officer Oliver from Rice University. So we're going to start here with an introduction about your law enforcement experience and why you decided to become a law enforcement officer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Deputy Bailey with Harris County Sheriff's Office. I started later in my life when I got to Harris County, so I've been there about 10 years. Within my 10-year span, I went from, we started in the jail, so we went from detention officer to patrol to an evidence technician. Now I work in Federation with the Homeland Security Division of Harris County. So in that, I've been at the county for a short amount of time. I've done a lot and been able to go to a lot of places and whatnot. My best asset is because I did start over, my mindset is more calm. I'll say this, I am who I am before doing it after my badge. And so my badge doesn't make me, right? My parents made me. And so my view sometimes will be a little bit different. But no, I've been in law enforcement, like I said, for about 2 years. And that's what I'm
Absolutely, absolutely. I am Sergeant DeAndre Hutchinson. I've been with the Houston Police Department for a total of 9.5 years. I started in 2012, shortly after the Chad Holly situation that happened here in Houston on the southwest side of town. And I got into it because I was just like, hey, this was very unjust. And I felt like that was the community that I was born and raised in, and it happened right down the street, on a street that I used to walk by every day going to school. So I felt like the law enforcement at that time was not doing an adequate job of protecting and serving my community. So I took it upon myself to join. I say, hey, I need to join that agency because I definitely feel like I can do a better job protecting and serving that community, which I love so dearly and I have been born and raised in. So that was that. I immediately joined and was immediately signed to patrol. I worked in patrol for about 6 years, and then I promoted and then I got voluntold to go to the command center. So I hear some laughing up here. Some people know about being voluntold to do some things. But that was part of my matriculation, and it was one of the better decisions better assignments that I could have been given, in that we oversee the whole city and any type of significant event, shooting, officer-involved shooting. You need bomb squad, SWAT, K-9, any specialized force. We're the people that call the people out to your scene or to those particular significant event scenes. I love my time at HPD, but it's not the thing that kind of significant. It's not the most important thing about my career. About a year ago, in January of 2020, I was elected to be the president of the Afro-American Police Officers League. And then, thank you. And in that time, right after being newly elected, George Floyd happened. And that's why anytime I get a mic, I want to make sure it's emphatically clear that black law enforcement was just as outraged as the community was when that happened, when he was senselessly killed at the hands of a law enforcement officer there in Minneapolis. So that was when APOL did our first ever press conference, and we went on a nationwide campaign advocating, saying that good police officers hurt just like our African American community hurts, and we stand for police accountability, police transparency, and appropriate police reform. And I've stood before the Texas legislature, as well as the mayor and the city council advocating for that. So that's me in a nutshell, and like I say, if anybody, we'll talk more later.
Good evening. My name is Derek Harris. I work for Lone Star College Emergency Management, Emergency Preparedness. I'm the director for that department. I've been in that department for the last 3 years. And prior to that, my law enforcement career started with Spring ISD Police Department. And from there, I went to Harris County Constables Precinct 1, and then transitioned over to Lone Star. So I've been with Lone Star since 2009. Also, I'm a college professor for Lone Star, and I teach criminal justice. And I taught criminal justice for 9th through 12th grade, Kingwood Park High School as well. Law enforcement wasn't a choice for me. It was something that I needed a job. So, amen. Substitute teacher, and I realized this is not going to work for me. So I saw an officer. What do I need to do to become an officer? So that's how I ended up in this profession. But I can say that over the last 16, 17 years, it has been a blessing for me, because I've been able to mentor, get degrees, get into a position where I can be an advocate for justice, for fairness, integrity, and just teach officers, it doesn't matter if they're young or old, be able to be honest with yourself, because what you do at the end of the day, it affects someone. And my goal at the end of the day is to be fair and be upfront. If you're right or you're wrong, it doesn't matter what color you are. And so I'm just thankful for the opportunity to sit on the panel with these guys, and hopefully tonight we take something and can learn from it and share it with someone else. Thank you.
I guess last but not least, and like on the panel, I'm probably a baby out of everybody up here, which is good. My name is Barry Oliver. Law enforcement experience, I have 12 years that I'm hitting. Started up north in a small PD, close towards New Caney. It's called Woodbridge Police Department. Small rural area PD. I dealt with sting operations from out there, from just being a one-man person on the show that we see on TV today, and everybody back up is 20, 30 minutes away, but it's on the individual. As a whole, you know, you control the scene and you make the best of it, because as an officer, what I experience is you can make a difference in someone's life by just, you know, the pen or just conversation. There's nothing wrong with talking your way through it, talking your way out, you know, and time is on your side. What's the rush? Also, on stuff too, what got me in this stuff is, as a single parent, seeing my family struggle, my mom struggle, then got over the first son to graduate from high school and college. And I want to make that difference in my life because working at Walmart and Wendy's and stuff, you know, it was money made to make money the right way. And I'm continuing to do it the right way. So what transitioned me to become a police officer was when I had a situation dealing with CPS. And it was dealing with my son, my first child. And it shook me up because I didn't know the terminology in the court system. And I'm just being honest with you straight up. No one, sometimes as a black male, we don't understand at that time. Go out and do your research. You know, be your own man. And so that would transition me to become an officer and stuff because I know the court system. And it's one thing we fail at as a male, the court system. We don't know it. We think we know it, but you'll know it when you get in it. It's best to stay out of it. You know, but we could do more help than harm as an officer. But I'm big about family and stuff. That's me. My son was the first, I want to say, that transitioned me to become an officer because I wanted to better in life. My dad was in the service. Never had a father figure in my life because he was murdered. Trying to be a good Samaritan, helping a young lady going through domestic violence herself. I still have the news article, Houston Chronicle paper, where it used to be the old paper, Coalition Door. I still have those articles today now. And that transitioned me because I wanted to change my son to have both parents involved in his life, not just as a single parent, because all of us can relate to when you have a child or a student or someone make their excuses. It's only an excuse, but I tell them the excuse is a way of copping out because parents go work 8 hours, 12-hour shifts. We already know parents trying to keep the roof over our head, lights on, food on the table. But as a child, you don't see that. You think your parent leaving, and that's all they do is going to go work, but not knowing the other side. So being in the shoes that my parent was in now, I'm very respectful about it. I'm grateful and blessed at the same time. So on the panel with the officers and stuff, and everyone here, last but not least, you know, we're all blessed. You know, regardless of whether you're uniform or not. You know, and badge, yes, it looks good on, but it's hard to get it off. You know, the situation is in, it's hard to get it off because you know who really for you. But I always say keep yourself spiritually in the uniform, keep yourself spiritually up. The how might always stay first and stuff before you do anything else. So that's my end. I'm ready to get started with everyone here and you know the questions and answers.
Thank you all for those responses. And I asked that question for a specific reason. And I wanted to know who you were. I wanted to know how much experience you had and why you became an officer. We have over 50 years of experience on this panel tonight. So we should be able to get some really good answers to help us understand how we can help to improve our community. We also have people who joined the force because they want to make a difference, whether it's to make a difference in their community or to make a difference with their families. But either way, they wanted to make a difference. They didn't want to keep things going in the same direction. And then we also found we have some pretty genuine people. Nobody joined the force so that they could beat up on anybody. Or anybody? Oh, you gotta leave that out. Okay. So we have some genuine-hearted people who have joined the police force. And so I told these guys, I said, you know, I'm going to throw some pretty tough questions at you. And so that's why I was glad that we laid the framework here just a second ago. But one of the questions that I have to ask is I just got a startling statistic. And that is if you're an African-American male, which is pretty much everyone in the audience here, pretty much everyone who will watch later, you're 6 times more likely to be fatally wounded in an encounter with law enforcement when there's a handgun or a weapon involved. 6 times more likely to be fatally wounded. And so we have to think about that when it comes to our community and how we need to handle ourselves when it comes to working with police officers. So the next question I have to ask this of you all is why is that statistic so important? And why is it so relevant to us? Why are we 6 times more likely to be shot or to be killed in an encounter with law enforcement? I don't know who wants to go first, but God bless you.
I was asked this question quite a bit, and you know, it's just a harsh reality that when we get into encounters with law enforcement, we have to realize that you don't know what officer you're going to get when you out there on a traffic stop, on a scene, where there's a gun involved. So I'm not here to advocate and say that all officers are good and we don't have any issues, because no profession is perfect. Nobody is perfect. And we've had our history that precedes us, precedes a lot of people on this panel. But yeah, it's a stark reminder that we have to do a better job as black men dealing with law enforcement. We have to have better training, better trained officers. But I can't explain why the statistic is what it is, but there is a deep history. There's a lot of trauma associated with encounters with African American males and in our history. But like I say, either we can crumble under that, or we can be a part of the solution, which is what these men up here on this panel have all decided to do, is join law enforcement and try to fight this battle from the inside. And another thing that I'll leave you guys with is that we also have to know what we're dealing with, right? You have to understand that law enforcement was started by slave patrols. Like, it was started as a way to oppress us as black men and women. So when you know that that's how it started, you have to understand that when you're being confronted, or when you know, that's the training and that's the mindset that has to be undone. Because now we're in 2021 and that's no longer the case. We're no longer slaves, but we have to undo that and let those officers that join under that mentality, under that training, they have to weed themselves out. They have to do something to get fired. They have to retire, go on about their business, so on and so forth, and let other people that have a sense of consciousness do this profession the right way with honor, integrity, and respect. And the more of us that join trying to do it the right way, I think the better off our community will be.
I'll say this. You only know what being black is like if you're black. My mom and dad, who were married 69 years, who were going home to Lord, they were born in the 1920s. My mom, as a kid, she told me, she said this, she wasn't trying to be racial things. She said, son, you black, and don't you ever forget it. Wasn't a bad thing, but she was in a sense telling me, you gotta work harder, you gotta do more, you have to do all these things because of the color of your skin. When it comes to black folk and law enforcement, we are an aggressive people. And because of what has happened in the past, there are times we are extremely aggressive. The only thing I can say is that we have to encounter those things with sometimes a calmer mindset, while it may not be as easy for us to do that because we are already knowing that we've been oppressed because of it.
Right.
And so it's not an easy attack. What I will say, we talked about this earlier, is that more of us have to become the police, because that's how you change the police system.
Right.
And so if you have a lot of people who are still with that mindset and they're still joining the police force, then we're still outnumbered. And so we can no longer use the thing from I don't like the police and I don't say how you can become police. Well, if you become the police, then you can change that mindset in order to deal with us and how we function. All right?
I want Officer Harris, and these were both really great responses. I want Officer Harris and Officer Oliver.
Kind of piggyback off what Deputy Bailey said. As us being African Americans, being black, we deal with a aggression. We as African Americans grow up where parents, when we were younger, and we do bad things, your parents say, hey, I'm gonna call the police over here. So we always showed a stigma of law enforcement in a negative way. But also us as African American men, we deal with a insecurity of not knowing who we are and can't identify. We have a pride issue. We don't know how to communicate. And so when it comes to us communicating, instead of us communicating with an officer, we jump to aggression. We become violent because growing up, we didn't see no one showing compassion toward us. We didn't see no one showing soft feelings. Soft feelings made you less of a man. But when you came in contact with an officer, your aggression built up because of what you've experienced, what you've been told, what you've identified yourself as being a black man, and your parents telling you, hey, I'm gonna call the police when you get in trouble. Or you seen a cousin or an uncle, someone beat by the police, all you saw was that negativity. And so when the police do approach you, it goes to that aggression. So as a black man, you have to learn how to humble yourself. Be able to identify who you are. That does not make you less than a man and saying, hold on, let's talk about this here. Because there are many African-American black men in prison now because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to identify themselves. There are many divorces because they don't know how to communicate with their spouses. So we as African-American men have to control our aggression. Know when to speak up, know when to listen. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in jail or dead. And that's where those numbers come up from, of the statistics and stuff.
I agree with all the men up here as well too. And once again, as a male, there's nothing wrong with being a male crying. You know, men do hurt, you know, as well as women cry as well too. It's, every man has that sensitivity. And when you come and engage with a male on male or interacting with the police, it becomes an ego problem. Because some see officers, you know, with power. No one has power. And I'm gonna say it again, only one person has power. If you set yourself up from childhood, you know, like Sergeant Harris said, that the interaction with males, you know, if you don't have that male perspective, the mindset of a male as a man, I'm gonna use it as everyone knows, boys to men. You become a boy before you become a man. You gotta walk before you talk. If you don't have yourself in order, it's gonna be hard to kind of gather yourself as a whole, as a man. You gotta be complete as a man. But as an officer, sometimes you gotta be incomplete, you know, because you gotta feel your way through it. Because we put on a uniform every day, and we don't know when we step out what's gonna happen. My thing about it is, as the statistics, you know, yes, as African American, yes, that engage in contacting with a traffic stop. We get calls on suspicious person walking down the street. What is a suspicious person? We don't know. I'm gonna use another, you know, analogy that we hear a player make it big. Oh, they're gonna give back to the community. Ask this question: what did they take from the community? They didn't take nothing from the community. They just give them back. You know, so it just goes to the way everything's interpreted as well too as a man. You know, men think that soft, you cannot cry. I can't speak for all of here, but I can speak for me. I have 2 daughters. Do that make me less of a man? No. I want to be a man, but I have to teach others and teach myself first before I teach others. So the statistics and stuff, yes, it's determined on, you know, why it's so high, because this is going to be an ongoing thing. This is not going to change from day one as we see history changes, but history repeats itself. You know, it's different situations, not saying the way with George Floyd, and, you know, there's going to be another George Floyd moving ahead. I'm not saying it that way, but that's where we're at as men. We do better. If we do better and stay together, come together, communication, I think we can make it. That's one way to do it.
Great responses, Rich. Officer Hutchinson, you were reaching for the mic like you had a couple more things you wanted to say.
I was just gonna pass it back to you.
That's a good neighborhood officer right there. We are gonna just have a quick break in, and then we're gonna come back to some of the questions.
Welcome back. We're glad to see everybody. Hope everybody's enjoying. We thank these wonderful panel for coming in and addressing the topics. Again, my name is Andrew Landry. I am the founder and CEO of Where Men Hurt. And so one of the topics that we're talking about is where we hurt in social justice. And I was very particular about being social justice, not injustice, because that's what we're striving for. So I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator, Phil, so we can continue with the questions.
Thank you, Brother Landry. All right, so before we took a break, we're getting ready to talk about this one topic. And it's probably going to be a sensitive topic, and it's about that blue wall, that silence that takes place whenever there is an event or an incident that occurs. And that blue wall, I'll try to describe it to you, is there is a brotherhood amongst law enforcement. anyone that wears the blue. And that is to have your back and to have your six. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And so that's to protect one another in good times and in bad. However, we've seen that there aren't enough officers willing to speak up against the bad officers that we call the bad apples in our law enforcement communities. And so the question I have for you all, for you gentlemen, is what can the black law enforcement community do to tear down that blue wall?
All right, so we got to pick wise. Only one person talking. All right, no, seriously, I represent over 700 officers at HPD as the president of the Afro-American Police Officers, and this is a topic that has come up quite frequently. We have to do more empowering officers to come forward with information, right? We have to encourage them because what we get all the time is, I'm scared of retaliation. I'm scared that if I come out and speak against my brother officer or fellow officer, I'm not gonna have backup on scenes when I get into a switch. And we have to do more to dispel those myths, because that's exactly what they are. Like Martin Luther King said it best, it's not where you stand in times of comfort, but where you stand in times of adversity. So this is the time is now, where we need to do more to empower our black officers, our good apples, if you will, to come forward, see something, say something. This is one of the things that I testified at the state legislature about, and while we have a law on the books now, a duty to intervene, that'll go into effect September 1. This is something HPD has already had in effect as a part of our general orders, but now it's state law, where officers have a duty to intervene. If they see an officer violating somebody's civil rights or doing something to hurt a prisoner in their custody, they have a duty, because it could be considered criminal if they don't take action to stop that criminal act from taking place. So we're changing the laws, we're getting better laws on our books, but we also are joining arms with the good officer community, and we're saying, hey, enough is enough, and we need to continue to bridge the gap between the community and the police and do more to move our communities forward.
I think that's a great response. Anyone else want to share on what they might want to do? Okay, we'll take it from there. All right, so the next question, and this is another tough one, is when it comes to training. I've heard it said whenever we see an encounter with law enforcement and someone from our community, there's always a shoot to kill mentality. But when we see law enforcement operate within the white community, there's always de-escalation. And someone said to me, well, why don't they train the officers in the same way that they train them when they come up against white suspects, right? And so talk to us about how the training can be improved so that we can see fewer instances of escalations in the black community, or at least at the same level we do in the white community. Hopefully I said that correctly. What can we do to improve training?
I said this earlier, more of us have to be on the force, because only us know how to deal with us.
Yeah.
Real quickly, I went to a scene and a guy was talking. It was an issue where he and this young lady were arguing and fighting. She took his cell phone. He wanted his cell phone back. When he was talking to me with his hands up, he kept talking. I'm like, man, keep your hands down. Just talk to me. And he couldn't talk to me when I raised his hands. So the higher his hands got, the louder his voice got. So I said, man, just talk to me. Put your hands right here. Just talk to me. So at the end of the conversation, he said, man, I don't know, I'm having a hard time. You started whispering. He started whispering because he lifted his hands up. And I'm saying, man, look here, if the other officers come on scene, you got your hands up, they're going to perceive that as you being aggressive. So just, because once again, you see me, I talk with my hands. So it's funny because he just started whispering. He's like, man, so this is what happened. And she took my phone, the lady called me and stuff like that. But once again, because I'm from where he's from, culturally, I understand, because once again, we are an aggressive people. We don't like folk in our business and all that kind of stuff like that. But when more of us come on this side, then now, because in reference to culturally, they don't know how to deal with us. But we don't want to deal with us.
Right. Right.
So the more of us that can deal with us, then the different that outcome will then be.
That's a powerful example. It's also, it speaks to recruiting, right?
Right.
As a solution, and going into the community, finding people that look like us, coming to work on the force. And so, there's still a gap though when it comes to training, where, we can teach folks how to deal with other cultures.
Right.
And to de-escalate some of these situations. I want to take the topic to profiling now. And, I've heard it said that, you have to, clean up, wear a suit, but I don't want to wear a suit all the time. The only reason I wore one today is because I'm coming to Where Men Hurt conference. So, but I don't want to wear a suit all the time. I want to wear, what I want to wear. I want to dress the way I want to dress, be like my community. So talk to us about how we can navigate through profiling that occurs from law enforcement.
When it deals with racial profiling, Officer Oliver, he used to be one of my officers. I was their supervisor. My first question to them, whenever they encountered someone and they come back and tell me, Sarge, we did this and that, what would be the first thing I ask you, Oliver?
What was the wrong thing, or what was the proper cause?
What's the PC? Any traffic stop, any detainment, any interaction with an officer, my first question is, what was the PC? What was the proper cause for stopping that individual? I don't care if they pink, red, blue, or green. If you do not have PC for stopping that individual, you shouldn't be bothered with. If you got to guess why you stopped them, you've messed up already. So many officers just go out there profiling individuals because, like you said, you're in regular clothes, you want to wear street clothes. You was at the dealership and profiled. Many officers find themselves not being able to do nothing, so they find themselves getting into stuff. So therefore, I'm going to just go out there and stop you for any reason. But now on the flip side, many of us as citizens, we don't realize that there are certain laws out there that we commit that we don't realize is breaking the law. For example, you can get a speeding ticket for riding a bicycle. So many of us don't realize there are certain laws that are out there. If your light is out for your license plate, if your windshield wipers are low or your tires are bald, window tint, music is loud. Also, there are city ordinances.
Switching lanes without signal.
Switching lanes, making a right turn on a red light without stopping.
Those are
Swinging and
pretext
banging.
stops, right?
Swinging and banging.
Pretext stops?
Pretext.
Pretext, like those are stops to get you to stop, right? Those are little violations.
Right.
Yes.
That's the PC that he's talking about, and then now we have an encounter where I'm looking for more.
Yeah.
So there are two folds to the situation. An officer just doing something just to do something, but citizens not realizing that there are laws. And so when you do encounter situations like that, as I tell citizens, even officers, signing a ticket book, signing a ticket does not mean that you're going to jail.
Right.
You're just signing saying, I'm up here in court. Signing a ticket does not mean that you're guilty. If you look at the citation, it'll tell you this does not mean that you're guilty. You're just going to show up in court on that appointed date. So now refusing to sign the ticket, saying that I want to go see the judge, meaning that the officer can
Take you to
to jail at that time. So we as citizens, we have those individuals who, them shade tree lawyers that we fool with, that we talk to. No, you can do this and do that. If an officer stops you nighttime, there are things that you can do. We can talk afterwards of things to do if it's nighttime. In the daytime, there are things to do for your safety and the officer's safety. So just put down the aggression. Listen, submit yourself. Because one thing about it, I tell citizens all the time on a traffic stop, I don't have court on the side of the street. Because I'm out here trying to watch you I'm also trying to watch cars that may can hit both of us, so there are things like that. So when it comes to racial profiling, we have to really understand why we're being stopped. Is the officer in the wrong, or is the citizen in the wrong?
Thank you for that response. I got a couple more hard-hitting questions for y'all, so I hope y'all are ready. This next question, it talks about the Karen and the kin culture. And the Karen and the kin culture is where we've seen where folks from other communities will use law enforcement sort of as a weapon against the black community. So they'll call law enforcement on black people at Starbucks, right? Or they'll call law enforcement, you know, you're partying too much on the side of the apartment complex, right? Or they'll call law enfortement, we just bird watching. You know, how many black folks y'all know bird watching, right? So, you know, something as senseless and harmless as that, you know, what can the law enforcement community do to clamp down on some of these activities? Ken and Karen,
Ken and Karen.
Susan and John.
I'm gonna start off. I used to work at Lawrenceville College Police Department, and it's different versus the community versus going to Rice University. I'm dealing with dormitory. So there's nothing bad on the call, but it all depends on the officer. So let me get that right on the first start, because Rice University, everyone knows where is it at, medical center, and you know you have different diverse stuff over there. And my call was kid in the dormitory making a whole lot of noise. So, you know, it's college, what kid not gonna make noise? So I get them, make a long story short. It was more of horse playing. But due to the fact that someone gonna get sleep, versus of them just going over there, hey, could you tone it down? They'll call the police to use us as their force shield to do what they could have did from the start. It's simple as can be. This goes back to the line of communication. When people are lacking communication, lacking the dialogue, you have a African American going just by our presence alone itself, that aura, it's strong. So when you engage going with someone off a call that you've been dispatched to, first of all, because we're going because we're dispatched. So with our mindset going in, we're going with the mindset because we're going by what being transmitted over the radio and communicated. Everyone hears the transmission. So we're going by what was been told. So kind of to help that part of us go back to get more of us. It goes to revert back to get more of us to see what we're going through. Because sometimes that call will be your last call. We don't know what's going on at the end. But when we get there, we sort it out. That's then becomes also the de-escalation. The communication, your voice, everything you can seize the moment. And just from there, just as experience from the streets and the university, the colleges, and so it's different, but it's also the same. And the reason why I say the same, because it's on you as an officer, as an individual, to make that impact and make that difference.
Great response, and as promised, I got some more tough questions for these officers. And it's not just the inequality and inequity that we see between law enforcement community and the black community. It's also within your own community. And so the question that I have to ask is, we've seen almost carbon copy incidents where a white officer might get involved into a use of force and they get a slap on the hand. However, a black officer is involved in a similar situation and they get a prison sentence. And so the example that I'm thinking about is I believe it's in Minnesota. Officer Giannis shoots Philando Castillo unlawfully in his car. There's no real consequence to that. However, Officer Muhammad Noor shoots a white woman to protect his fellow officer, and he gets 10 years in prison. So what can we expect our elected officials, what can we expect our law enforcement leadership to do to ensure fairness amongst the ranks of the law enforcement community?
Yeah, no. Man, you must talk to some of the reporters I've been talking to in the past. But no, this is one of those things that, I hate to sound like a broken record, but we have to get more people involved in the process. More people in law enforcement, but also more people participating in the voting process, because we have to be the ones that are not only running for our elected positions, but also voting to get good-hearted people in our elected positions. But just like you mentioned, I just want to stop real quick. And I mean, in a lot of your examples, I ain't hear Houston come up not one time. But not to say that Houston is perfect, but we are doing a better job, and a lot of other agencies can take note of how we operate here in Houston. We are a very, very progressive law enforcement department, and that's thanks to our mayor, Sylvester Turner, as well as our chief of police, at least for HPD, Troy Finner. So we have to do more, and we have organizations like APOL that's fighting on the inside to make sure fair and equitable treatment across the board, right? So if you can't compare apples to apples. I'm not very familiar with that specific case, but that's one of the things that we do have to do. When we start fighting, saying, hey, this is not fair, this is not right, we have to be able to look at those case files and read them intelligently and see what all the sustained complaints are. And another thing that a progressive law enforcement agency is going to do is look at the history, because we don't wake up bad. Normally there's a pattern there. And when you see some of these people that are getting indicted, you see in their 3x5 their history. They've had other sustained complaints from citizens, other officers, other supervisors have already complained on that person. And that's where we got to do a better job at getting them before it turns into a $1 million lawsuit, right? So we got to do a better job. And like I said, there's no agency that's perfect, but the more people that we have inside fighting, advocating for those good-hearted officers, the good ones, the good apples, and we support them, I think we'll get a better police response.
Great response. We want to get a couple of questions from the audience. And we do have a question from the audience.
So I'm getting a chance to make it. Like, you had a point, but like, when do the time when you say they've been slapped on the wrist 5 times, and then all of a sudden the 6th time they kill somebody?
Right.
Like, when do, like...
All right, so the question is, accountability, basically.
Right.
And at what point do we step in? Does leadership step in and hold that officer accountable? They've got 5 infractions in their jacket, but then it's the 6th time and someone gets hurt. What do we do about accountability?
So that's where we need organizations like APOL. We need other elected officials to support doing thorough overhauls to change the culture. I'll give you this example. When Mayor Sylvester Turner brought Chief Acevedo to HPD, we had DWIs that were running rapid. We had officers getting convicted of DWI and still working. So it breeded a culture where it was okay to drink and drive, even as a police officer. But what message does that send the community? So when Mayor Sylvester Turner brought Chief Acevedo in, he had a zero tolerance policy on alcohol-related offenses. That's either drinking and driving or investigating or failing to investigate a DWI. And he started firing people immediately, first chance. And what did that do to the culture? Everybody was like, oh crap, he's serious. I ain't doing, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna get an Uber. We came out with the cab car program. You know what I'm saying? They got very innovative, in terms of how they provided resources for officers to get a safe ride home. We do need to do that same thing, where when people violate people's civil rights, they need to get fired and indicted. We need to stop letting these labor unions protect them in their sense when they violate people's civil rights and using excessive force on scenes. So if we start doing that and we send that message out to the community, then like I say, everybody else gonna fall in line. But we have to do more of that. And like I say, I just want you to know, brother, you got an advocate on the inside that's trying to identify those. And I'm happy to announce The APO has been on the front line, and we have gotten some racist officers fired for Facebook posts, for saying stuff on scenes that got captured on body-worn camera, where it would normally get swept under the rug. But because we exposed it, because our relationship with the media outlets, Shamika Knight, Isaiah Carey, we got those officers, we exposed it, shine that flashlight, and got those officers off of police.
So is your particular organization a part of Noble? Is it a subset of Noble?
So NOBLE is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives,
Okay.
right? So I think they've relaxed the standard where you don't have to be a chief to be a part of NOBLE. But yeah, we're like a baby brother, if you will, for NOBLE. But yeah, we have a very good relationship. George Ryan, their current Houston chapter president, me and him are good friends. We collaborate on a lot of different issues. And we share press releases, so on and so forth. So yeah, we have organizations like that. I encourage everybody to kind of get involved, support organizations like that, and do everything that you can, because this is gonna, I tell people all the time, it's not a us versus them. We have to work together with the community if we ever want to make our community safer and better for the next generation.
So before you take the mic, right? So the last question I have is, I'm from Delaware.
Okay.
Right? And so in Delaware, there's this fight against the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights. Right? This idea that what's being protected is not necessarily good or bad officers. It's a system that's in place that is very, very difficult to overturn. How do we dismantle the system, particularly because the system, I'm assuming, is for you guys' benefit, right? That their argument is
Protection.
right. So how do we balance the approach of making sure that you guys are protected, and at the same time we make sure that officers are doing the right thing?
Absolutely. Great question. And that is exactly kind of what I started with appropriate police reform. Appropriate police reform, because yes, the system has been abused for decades, right? So we have to move this back closer to the middle, but not compromising the good officers that come to work doing the job the right way with honor, integrity, and respect. So when you get it closer to the middle by enacting laws like the duty to intervene, banning chokeholds, banning profiling. So you take away some of those tricks that they used to use to mess with black folks, if you will. Like I say, now we don't even have PIs anymore. We have a sobering center, diversion programs for mentally ill, diversion programs for people with alcohol abuse, substance abuse, diversion programs for mental illness. So we get it closer to the middle, but then we also have to put more good officers into the equation. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, let's say we got 4 good officers up here, and 5,000, we ain't doing nothing. You get what I'm saying? We can't change the culture with 4 officers. We have to change the culture when we get an army of officers and we stand in line shoulder to shoulder with our white brothers, our Asian brothers, our Hispanic brothers that want to do the job the right way. Because the ones that want to do it the right way, we can't stand when other people tarnish this badge that we hold so near and dear to our hearts. So that's the way that we do it. We got a long way to go, but like I said, I just want to encourage y'all that y'all got people that's fighting on the inside.
And speaking of that, Harris County is hiring. You got retirement. You can get out your money at the house. You got insurance.
Good benefits.
Good benefits.
That's awesome. Looks like we have a question over here.
Yeah. Okay, see, like with me myself, okay, I just live in Acres home. Okay, like I'm a victim of the police. You know, my same color police. And I had a good attitude and stuff like this. And then still got beat up, jumped on and stuff like this. You know, and then so that changed my whole perception. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be mean. I'm gonna be mean to you. I'm gonna have attitude coming at you because I got to stop this for something simple. You know, hey, I went in the wrong lane and stuff like this. Hey, I'm put my hands on the steering wheel, and I'm gonna do what it say and stuff like this. Boy, you gonna get out of here and stuff like this. And they have another one that's counterparts, you know, different color counterparts, and then So now I got the mentality, now, hey man, all y'all like this.
I got you.
You know,
I got
so
you.
that was hard for the community to change.
So
I'm
let me
like you
restate
tell me,
that.
I'm talking with my hands, see?
Yeah.
Good example, and let me restate the question. You know, in situations where we still comply with the police, we still turn up as victims at the hands of police. What do you say to someone who's been through that?
Real quick, brother. Hey, on behalf of our police officer, I apologize to you. That was wrong. That was wrong. And like I said, we call that kind of, we call a spade a spade. And that was wrong, what happened to you. So like I said, I apologize to you. But beyond that apology, we need to look up that case number. We need to know when it happened, and we need to know the officers so we can go back and if those officers are still on the department, they need to be dealt with. And there needs to be some type of discipline for their actions on that day. Because if we remain silent, just like when we was fighting in the civil rights movement and you had Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and all of them standing up for people's rights, and when you had the NAACP bringing people in so they could file complaints and expose the corruption, if we don't speak up for ourselves and we don't use organizations to bring accountability to situations like that, it'll just be more of the same. Because if you didn't speak up, you allowed that to happen to that brother right next to you, the brother in the black shirt, and these brothers over here.
Question for you. Did he take you to jail?
Yeah, I went to jail.
Okay. Did you get his name or anything?
Okay.
How long has this been?
Okay, it's been a while ago. But the thing was, back
I
you
got
know,
you.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know who to talk to.
I got you.
And then the one who I tried to talk to, hey man, you better be quiet. And, you know, so,
I
and
got
now
you.
she just would just, hey man,
It's a lot of trauma, and that's the trauma that I spoke of. And now it's incumbent on officers like us to do more trust building because the trust has been eroded over decades. And we can't undo what happened to you.
Right.
But what we can do is going forward, hold other officers accountable. So, yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, man. But
okay, but you know, now I'm getting the tools. Now I'm seeing the tools. I'm learning the tools.
Yeah.
The time I didn't, you know,
Yeah,
didn't know
no.
what to turn to.
well, good thing. Thank this brother right here for putting this on for you. So come out here.
And I think it is probably proper to say, Andrew, that we will share resources on Where Men Are Hurt website, Facebook page, etc., on how to handle these types of encounters and what we should do as a community on how to report these. We have time for one more question, and it's really a tough question. It's one that kind of goes back to Rodney King. How many of you all saw the Rodney King beating? Right. It just so happened that the person who recorded that, they had just bought this camera. And it just so happened they just learned how to use this camera. They recorded it. Fast forward to a couple of years later, last year, we're all sitting at home around the television set or around Facebook or around our cell phone, and we see the horrific events that take place in Minnesota and the George Floyd event. And so what I'm getting ready to talk about is body cameras and, of course, citizens using their cell phones to record these incidents. What should police departments do should they relax their standards, or should they tighten up their standards on body cams, and should they relax their rules for citizens recording these events? And if so, what does that do to the behavior of law enforcement?
So once many of these incidents started surfing up where officers was using excessive force or there were murders taking place, it became every agency had to create a policy for body-worn cameras. So every agency now has to have a body-worn camera, and it must be utilized. If you're not utilizing it, you fail in what the policy says, which it falls on you, and you're reprimanded for that, discipline for that. When it relates to citizens videotaping, citizens can videotape, as long as you're not intervening with the incident. You give enough space, necessary space, where the officer can still do his job. If they come towards you, make sure you get their information, jot all that information down, record them, Let them know that you're recording, but you're going to stand back. You're not trying to intervene to what they have going on. So yes, there are policies in place for body-worn cameras, and there are also laws for citizens utilizing or videotaping, as long as you're not intervening with the incident.
Yeah.
I want to thank y'all. This has been an amazing panel. You all have the toughest job, but you also have our gratitude, you have our respect, you have our appreciation, and we thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank you all for attending. And for those who are watching this later, it's very important that you take a look at some of the resources that we'll share, and then also make sure that you do your part as a citizen to hold these men accountable and their brothers accountable in order to make sure that our community is a safer place to live. So I'm Philip Dunn. I want to bring up our proud founder, Andrew Landry.
Well, I hope y'all enjoyed it. Again, we want to thank you all for sacrificing your time to come and present to us. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you here. If you have more questions, look for this more. I mean, the goal is to get to the bottom of the barrel, to get to the solutions, and that's what we're here to do. So again, on behalf of Where Men Hurt, Andrew Landry, I want to thank y'all that are tuning in and thank y'all that are here.